Dmitri, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We seem so far not to have heard a great deal about cyber warfare as Russia moves into Ukraine. Is that an accurate assessment? Am I expressing it correctly? And if I am, why do you think that is the case?
So far, Russia has not indeed used much of cyber warfare capabilities in Ukraine, in part because they don't need to. Obviously, they have overwhelming kinetic advantage with ground forces, tactical aviation, electronic warfare units that are set up on the borders of Ukraine. So I don't expect that we will see a lot in cyberspace in Ukraine itself, but I do worry a lot about blowback on the West. With all these sanctions that are going to place on Russia that are going to choke their economy, as your guest just previously said, there's no way that Russia is not going to take it lying down. They're going to respond, and cyber is one of the ways that they can respond against us.
So you fully expect that. Where would you expect it? In which countries or all countries of the West that have taken sanctions action against Russia, and against which kinds of industries? What's most vulnerable?
Well, I think they're definitely going to try to target Europe, very likely to target Europe in order to try to divide this united alliance. It's been remarkable to watch NATO, and including Germany, be very aggressive in sanctioning Russia. And I think they're going to try to impact the German population by targeting perhaps their energy sector that is already, of course, so dependent on Russian gas. And then we might see blowback here in the United States now that the sanctions have gone into place on Russia and their banks. We may very well see a response on our financial sector and cyberspace. What
is one expectation people might have, Dmitri, that you think is ill-founded? You know, at a time when everyone's piling into this sector and nearly all the stocks are rallying, any words of caution?
Well, I think the important thing to realize is that even if we do have major cyber attacks being launched against us, they're not going to have lasting effects. The one thing that's very difficult to do in cyberspace is to take something down permanently. After all, it's IT networks, they can be rebuilt. And even in the most disruptive cases we have seen, including from Russia, networks were rebuilt within days. So it will have an effect, but it will be a fleeting effect.
So what does the West do? How does it respond if it is hit by these kinds of cyber attacks? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, if Russia takes these kinds of moves against the West, against NATO, are those acts of war that would require a proportionate response or something more?
Well, there's no doubt that we're going to have to respond if those cyber attacks are launched against us. The problem, of course, is that our response economically is going to be very limited because we've already basically emptied the chamber on sanctions. We've gone with very, very aggressive sanctions right off the bat. We can do more on the energy side, but beyond that, we're going to be very limited in what we can do to Russia. So we might very well respond with cyber attacks on Russia. The challenge, of course, is that you don't want to get into a tit-for-tat cyber war with Russia, because there's no way that that conflict will stay just in cyberspace and may very well escalate into the physical sphere. And the one priority that the Biden administration keeps repeating, both internally inside the White House and externally, is that they do not want a conflict with Russia. And that's going to be very, very critical to manage in the coming days.